Hi, I'm Vincent Ho with Musical Toronto, and with me as my guest is composer Georg Friedrich Haas. Welcome. So good to have you here.
Thank you so much for this invitation. It's such a great experience to be here, to be in this wonderful city, to listen to this wonderful orchestra. I have just heard the first performance of my orchestra piece, and I'm very happy to be here and looking forward to the next concerts.
And Georg, you're here for the New Music Festival that's happening with the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra, and they're performing 3 works of yours. String Quartet No. 6, Open Spaces No. 2 in memory of James Tenney, and Traum in des Sommersnacht for orchestra. What inspired you to write a piece that pays homage to Mendelssohn?
Well, I think, especially in Germany and Austria, Mendelssohn is one of those composers who don't get that honor which they should have. I think it's a bad heritage of the anti-Semitic tradition, starting with Richard Wagner and having the terrible peak during the Nazi time. I, for myself, I was full up with negative prejudgment about Mendelssohn, which I picked up during my studies. And then I found how amazing this composer did work, and I did some analysis, and I wrote a theoretical article with the title Mendelssohn the Avant-Gardist. And I found that Mendelssohn had some things in his music which are extremely far-looking to the future. And this aspect of his avant-gardistic techniques is not recognized because his music in every moment sounds such beautiful, such amazing, such clearly composed that you don't understand that they don't recognize what really happens. And for example, I could find in one of his symphonische Dichtung, symphonic poems. Sorry for using the German words, I will try to translate. Meeresstille und glückliche Fahrt, Silence of the Seas and Happy Driving. The translation is very bad. It's Opus 27, where he has a tutti of the orchestra, with the full orchestra, without one instrument, the piccolo flute. Why? Because the piccolo flute underlines the highest voice. And he does not want to bring the highest voice of the sound to the foreground. He wants to compose the inner life of the choir. And I feel in pieces like this, or if you look how he's instrumentating, you find sometimes he realizes Schoenberg's idea of a sound melody within his very traditional tonal harmonies.
And when you say sound melody, do you mean Klangfarben melody?
Klangfarben melody, yeah. You use in
Yes, we use the original.
Sorry,
I understand.
Maybe I repeat and then you can cut it. And if you analyze his works, his symphonic work, his orchestral work, you will maybe make the experience that Mendelssohn has realized many aspects of Schoenberg's idea of Klangfarben melody, but he used this technique of melodies, of sounds, of Klangfarben melody. He used this technique in a very traditional tonal harmonical system. And therefore the beautiness of these sounds make it difficult for us to perceive the avant-gardistic aspects of his music.
I see. So generally, then you started to discover these forward-thinking elements in Mendelssohn's works that was not noticed before, generally, I guess, ignored before. And when did you start to make these discoveries for yourself?
Oh, but it's a longer perception. Step by step, the last 10
it's
years.
little
It was not one point where I was.
As a composer, when I was listening to your work, I heard so many elements, almost generally 3 things. I heard sounds of nature, elements of nature that makes me think of the outdoors. Your musical language, a lot of textures, microtonalities, micropolyphony, and then of course there's Mendelssohn's quotes that you interweave in and out. And for me it feels like almost like a dream, where I'm going through these moments where I'm reminded of Mendelssohn, because Mendelssohn plays a huge role for me when I was a composer learning my trade, and we've all had to study a lot of Mendelssohn's music, and so hearing this, there was a nostalgic element to this piece. Was that something you were trying to capture?
Nostalgic elements are quotations of Mendelssohn.
Right.
And looking at them or listening at them, like a scientist is looking to the special elements. But when you say dreams, that's very correct, because of the famous piece of Mendelssohn, which I also quoted at the beginning, Sommernachtstraum, the Midsummer Night Dream, is the center of this homage to Mendelssohn. And maybe I should try to translate what I did with the German language. The Mendelssohn piece is called Ein Sommernachtstraum. That's, if you translate it word by word, you would say a summer night dream. Of course, the English title is different. You say Midsummer Night Dream. It's more poetic. But word by word, it's a summer night dream. And what I do, I just change a little bit to Traum in the Sommersnacht, or translating word by word, dream in the summer's night.
Dreams in the summer's night.
And this is almost the same, but you feel there's a much darker background. Because what is a summer's night? And as a person impressed by the terrible history of the 20th century, night for me is always all connected with the loss of hope, loss of utopia, and it covers a huge range, which is also the Holocaust and is integrated. Of course, it's not a piece about Holocaust; it would be stupid, but to bring this into this idea. But the summer's night is a kind of abyss.
An abyss.
Formalize with the summer's night a kind of abyss by using the abyssless words of Mendelssohn. Maybe I should repeat about the complete.
Sure.
Yeah. When I say Sommersnacht, the summer's night, behind this language structure, there's a kind of abyss. In Mendelssohn's title, Sommernachtstraum, there is no abyss at all. This is one of the differences, one of the things which I want to explain in this piece.
In this piece. And so when you were trying to capture this, I guess, non-existent abyss, or the lack of the abyss, how were you able to achieve that as you were trying to meld your language with Mendelssohn's?
Well, I think I feel myself being a kind of a negative Midas. If Midas touches something, it becomes gold.
Yeah.
I have for me something that person. I touch something, it becomes darkness, and I think maybe this happened in this piece too.
Well, I didn't capture that at all. In
That's
fact,
fine.
But I understand.
Good luck for you.
Well, it's interesting that you say that you're the opposite of Midas, because I felt that this piece, if anything, highlights the beauty of Mendelssohn in your own way. In fact, it honors Mendelssohn in so many ways. Now, with this particular work, I'm curious. I know that as a composer, it's hard enough trying to create an idea, a fresh new idea. It's even harder to try and develop that idea in your own way. How did you find it was for you using other composers' sources, other composers' works and music, integrating it into your own music? Was that had its challenges as well?
I don't have one way to do it. I have composed a piece about Scriabin's Ninth Piano Sonata, which is just an instrumentation, who translates the world of the piano world to the orchestral world. One of the things which I think Scriabin's music is based on the 10 fingers of his hand, and if I write for the orchestra, I'm free. What would happen if Scriabin would not be captured by the necessity to write for 10 fingers?
Oh, I see.
And I also wanted in this piece to underline the, can you say demonity? The darkness, the black mass in this music. This is one approach. In the second piece, Tria ex uno, based on Josquin de Pré, I just worked on the idea of working with time, which Josquin realized in his second Agnus Dei in the Missa Lomame Super Voces Musicales, this very famous composition where he's writing only one line and it's sung in 3 different mensural systems and to get an amazing, beautiful 3-part choral sound. And asked what would happen if I try to transform these ideas, this conception into the language of the end of the 20th century or beginning of the 21st century.
I see.
In my third, maybe, the third piece which I composed to old music is Torso, based on an unfinished sonata of Schubert. Here I remember a performance of this piece by Sviatoslav Richter, where he played it in an extremely slow tempo. The first movement need about 50 minutes in this performance.
Wow. Yeah.
And I copied Sviatoslav Richter's tempo a little bit, not so slow, but I got this direction, and made a sound composition based on this sonata.
I see.
And then, also I made clear why Schubert had to stop, because in this sonata there are so many things where he's opening ideas for the future. For example, he's here working with the overtone chord and using the ninth as a consonant. Or another example is the third movement, the menuetto. He copies or goes further than Beethoven in the idea to replace the repetition of the first element by a variation. If you think of the second movement of Sonata Quasi una Fantasia, Opus 27 by Beethoven, he doesn't make a repetition sign, he makes a variation in the repetition.
Right.
Schubert does the same, but the first element is in A flat major, and the repetition in A major.
Okay.
That's incredible what he's doing.
Especially at that time of period.
And then, when he's coming back in the form, and he should repeat, he stops. And I understand why he stopped, because what should he do? But for us today, if you listen to this music, hearing a phrase and repeat it a semitone higher, that's a very cheap element of popular music. And how can we understand emotionally that something which is a cheap element of
musical expression, or musical moment
of Muzak, has been a kind of French Revolution in music 150 years ago.
So at the time, it was absolutely revolutionary, because it's never been done before, because there's all these formalities that the composer at the time had to sort of follow. But for us today, it's seen as something cheap, because it's become almost a cliche. But people forget the context of when something like that happened during Schubert's time. So,
but when I instrumented it, I can combine with sounds that make it emotionally clear. Oh, here's happening something.
I see. So when that...
let me continue. It's the last piece, which is which I did in connection to old music is 7 Klangräume, 7 sound spaces, you can translate it really correctly, based on Mozart's Requiem.
Okay.
I asked the performers to play only that which Mozart has written. And Mozart's technique of unfinishing is very interesting. Schubert composed until one end perfectly and then suddenly stopped. Okay. You can play Schubert until one moment and then interrupt. Okay. Mozart did it different. He made a kind of sketch of everything. So that does mean he composed the bass, sometimes clear, he didn't write it down, and you have and almost no middle voices. So that does mean if you listen to this, what he has written, you hear Mozart, which is very, very badly instrumentated. Because it's missing. There's one movement where the viola doesn't play anything about one pitch in the final chord.
Right.
But if you listen to this, you feel what could have happened if Mozart would be able to fulfill it. And what I did is I let it as it is written and composed spaces, soundscapes between, which have had no relationship to the music of Mozart, but just the function to open our ears to hear freshly and clear once again when the new element is starting.
I see.
Of course, there are some relationships and there are some connections, but in general, this is a fundamental.
So some of these pieces where you get inspired by the music of other composers, it's inspired. A lot of it comes out of these realizations where you discover what they try to do, and you emphasize through your own compositional process of what they're doing, these innovative, revolutionary techniques, and you highlight them in your own way.
I hope to do that.
Okay, well that's fantastic. Now with your string quartet though, that's being performed here at the New Music Festival, the string quartet number 6, this is entirely your own piece. There are no quotes. There are no quotes in this.
No conscious quotes.
No conscious quotes, yes. And so this, first of all, when I listened to this, I was struck by how you use textures, textualism, and as well as microtonalism, in a way that's very expressive. A lot of the textures, when I hear such textures with a lot of works, you hear it on the forefront. But with how you approached it, you really give the performer something to express while creating this texture. Now, my question is, was this something that you always think about when you write your music? It's about giving the performer something to express and not just the concept itself.
This is, for me, absolutely important. Expression is why I do it. I understand that it was necessary for some decades after 1945 to avoid expression. After the abuse of expression by the Nazi system, it was not possible to compose this expressive, continue in this expressive way. But I think starting with Wolfgang Riem, this has changed because expressionism is a fundamental part of music, and I would say even if you try to avoid expression, you cannot avoid it 100%. Stockhausen's piano piece number 10 is constructed in every moment, but I think it's expressive too. If you listen to it, you have some kind of expression. But maybe you cannot sit down. I cannot sit down and say, okay, what do I want to express? Okay, today's Wednesday, it must be love. And no, it's not possible.
It doesn't work that way.
And it does not even work that I put direct emotions one-to-one. Because when I'm sad, I compose a sad piece. No, it's not possible. Sometimes, some very few pieces of mine do have political convictions. For example, in Vain, which I composed after the right-wing party became part of the government in Austria. But if you listen to this piece, it's not necessary to understand the political background, and it's not the. It is. I am writing about the terrible fact that things which you assumed they are gone forever, suddenly they are back. Terrible things where you assume they are gone forever, now they are back. And this is the background. It has been of course I have emotions about this, and this background about the structural background of this piece. Well, my last piece based on the political situation is a piece for trumpet solo. I Can't Breathe in Maverick Garden, where I compose a piece about my emotions about the racist situation in the city which I'm living now, and but it's a kind of sorrow which I'm composing, and there's also a structural moment. This piece starts with not a 12th tone, but in a let's say traditional 12th tone or expressive melody, like a Kaddish, like a song of sadness about somebody who's died, and then the range of the melody is microtonal is reduced, and at least it's only 16th of tones, and you feel if you listen to this piece, this is how somebody is pressed.
Right.
And this is emotional. I hope it is emotional. It's also structural, and I don't sit. But the base is not to sit here. Oh, I'm so sad that these things are happening. The base is how can I transform these things which are happening to a musical structure, to music.
So there's so many levels that you think about,
or
layers.
I hope.
Yeah, layers. There's the idea, there's the structure, and of course there's the emotional content that you want to say, especially with this particular string quartet, number 6, which the RDD will be performing this Sunday. There's so much profundity that is being said.
But in this piece, I do not remember that there is a concrete situation.
It wasn't okay.
But it's maybe a general.
It was just
feeling.
I see. With the third work that is being performed here at the New Music Festival in Winnipeg, Open Spaces number 2 in memory of James Tenney. Now this is quite a contrast from the other 2 works we just talked about. This one is first of all in memory of an American composer who, from what I understand, you know very well, whose music has influenced you on so many levels. What is it about James Tenney's music that you feel makes it important for people to know about?
James Tenney is one of the pioneers of microtonal music. He wrote pieces based on the perception of the human ear, which is a very important approach. For example, if you compare with the Schoenberg tradition, the bass is not the perception, the bass is the structure. If you compare with the tradition of the spectral music, the bass is not the perception, the bass is the spectral analyze. And James Tenney says, no, the bass must be the human perception. And I think this is a very important approach which I love very much.
Sorry, you meant the bass?
The base of the musical theory which you.
Oh, I see. The fundamental. Okay. The fundamental. Yeah, sorry.
Say it once more. You may cut.
It's okay.
Say it once more. I think the fundament of the music theory of James Tenney is the perception, and he is composing music based on the perception of pitches, of the perception of overtone chords, with the perception of the differences of pitches. And I think this theoretical fundament to base on the perception is very important. It's something which I agree personally, totally. And it's an opposite, for example, to the Schoenberg and post-Schoenberg base, where the composer trusts the structure, or as well in the opposite to the spectral tradition, where the composers trust the spectral analyze. And but what James Tenney opens is the way how human beings perceive pitches, combinations of pitches, and differences of pitches. The title is in connection, it's the title of quotation also to a piece of James Tenney, which I love very, very much. The title of this piece is In a Large Open Space.
In a large open space.
And therefore, open spaces, it is a kind of, you see the relationship.
I see.
I heard this piece 2 times. If you see the score, you will ask, yes, and where's the composition? The score is just the row of the overtones, scale of the overtones based on F1, the lowest F of the piano.
Right.
And a small text. Each instrument has to play those pitches of the row which is possible to play in the exactness of plus minus 5 cents. This means the piano can play only the fundaments, the fifths, the ninths, and also the minor ninths and the minor tenths, but not the major tenths and not the major sevenths.
Yes, all those
all those things.
Right.
And the other instruments do have control machine who controls the pitch and adjusts their pitches to this machine.
Yes,
and they have to be placed in a large open space freely.
So it will only work if it's an open, large space. Yeah, it has to be that.
And I've heard this piece 2 times. Once in Austrian church, which was being constructed in the 13th century.
Yeah.
With this amazing reverb of the church.
Oh, I'm sure it must be.
And the second time in Luxembourg, in the caves of the castle. And it was amazing. And the interesting thing in this piece, which I don't copy, but this is what I admire in James Tenney music. The composer is not this person or who writes the music. The composer is this person who listens to it. Because if you listen to this piece, you walk around, you decide, I go no to the double bass, who always plays the fundamental. No, I walk to the trumpet, I want to hear them. And therefore you change by the position you have in this space.
So a person can just walk freely?
Can just walk freely between that.
I see.
And everybody creates his own piece by himself, and it's incredibly beautiful.
I see, that's very interesting. So it's almost as if the audience or the listener, it can be the architect of their own experience of this piece just by moving around.
I have heard a variation of this conception. It's against Ligeti in a performance of Ligeti's piece of 100 metronomes.
Oh my goodness!
Where you also could walk between them.
Right.
It's absolutely not what Ligeti wanted. It's against,
I understand.
Against Ligeti. But I'm very happy to have had this experience.
But that's been a wonderful experience to have that counterpoint of 2 different experiences.
And you can filter out one of them of the metronomes by going very near to it.
It's almost like a surreal experience where it changes no matter where you go. It's going to change. It's going to be a different piece everywhere you go. I see. So in this particular piece, in open spaces, number 2, you try to capture that spaciousness and counterpoint.
Maybe I should confess why it is number 2.
Oh, yes, sure.
It's not 100% serious, but I'm happy to do that. I was at work cooperation. No, this is Open Spaces is commissioned by Warsaw Autumn. It was performed at Warsaw Autumn. The first performance, there was this organizer in Berlin who made a festival who gave me a commission.
I see.
And I saw I have not the time to write it, and I said, sorry, I cannot write this piece for you.
Right.
And then he said, okay, but now I have a problem, because I got my support by naming you.
Oh.
I said, okay, what shall we do? And then, okay, I make a second version of this piece, but I don't change any pitch. I only change the position of the performance.
I see.
This is, of course, it is in tradition of Tenney.
Right.
I don't accept any fee for my composition.
I see.
But you have a first performance.
I see. Okay.
The interesting thing is, originally I did not plan to have this piece in a spatial situation. But it's so much better if you do the spatial situation that during the synthesis performance, this piece always is performed
So
in
that's-
the specialization.
So that's how you changed it from open space number 1, is you changed the whole,
Only change the specialization.
the positions. And then hence that's how you captured James Tenney's, in some
But,
ways.
the original title has been Open Spaces for James Tenney.
Oh, I see. Okay.
James Tenney has been here from the
I
very
see.
beginning. And during the end of the piece, I also quotate a piece of Tenney. He has written an amazing piece for violin solo,
Yeah.
Koan,
Which you quote in this work, right?
and I quoted this work.
Right.
And of course, it's absolutely against the idea of James Tenney, because James' piece is based on one individual who does this process. Koan is a Buddhistic symbol for getting the target, something that you have to follow. And he is, and it's just one process, tremolo between, start with a tremolo between the two open strings, the G and D, and then he makes a very, this tremolo, always, he makes a very slow glissando unto the unison,
Right.
then to the fifth.
Right.
But there also exists a version for this piece for string quartet, which I love very
There's a
much.
string quartet version.
Where James does divide this glissando in very small steps based on complex overtone relationships. And the second violin, the violoncello, and the viola make a kind of augmentation, the transforming of these microtonal steps. What I am doing, I make a kind of a choral of 10 koan performing string players, which create a sound which is very different from the original idea of James.
I see. So that's how you interpret it. This his music.
I steal his idea.
Steal his idea.
And I make a variation.
Well, I remember a quote. I think I forgot what composer said. Great composers don't create; they steal other people's ideas. Well, that's actually very interesting to learn about how you approach this particular piece, because it's in many ways, even though like the first piece we talked about, that honors Mendelssohn, you use quotes of his that comes in and out like a dream. Here you capture his idea, James Tenney's idea, and you in a way that captures his concept of open spaces, the spaciousness, as well as integrating his notion of capturing the fundamental, the harmonic series, and how he approaches that. And with your string quartet number 6, it's entirely you. It's in the sense that it's your material, you're expressing yourself. There's something very dark, as you would say, dark and emotional about it. So the 3 works, even though you have a whole huge list of works that you've created over years, gives the audience some inkling as to your creative process in many ways.
I hope. Great. I think there are 3 very different.
Yes.
They're very different pieces.
Yeah, very different pieces. Very different pieces that captures a different side of you as a composer and your creative approach. Now, quickly, I just want to wrap this up. I was going through your biography, and it mentioned that you were very open about talking about your difficulties when you were trying to establish yourself as a composer, especially when you were younger, and such. Now, in this day and age, what advice do you have for young composers who are trying to make their careers?
First, do what you want, but be sure that you really want it. I think that I had some hard time. Nobody really trusted into my music, but I trusted in me, and I never stopped learning. And today, from a distance, I would say it has been my good luck that my career started such late, because therefore I had the chance to study much longer than those colleagues who had more success. And I think what I would say to all colleagues, find out what you are really wanting to do. Because if you look to learn how it would be, in which way shall I compose to be a successful composer, you must always be conscious you will be one of 250 who have the same position. If you do exactly what you are doing, you're the only one. Therefore you have the chance.
I see. So stick to your guns, commit to it, and be true to yourself.
Okay.
No, that's a fascinating story because it's you never know how people are going to react when you do that, and yet at the same time you never know what's going to happen in the future, in the long term. As you said, you were very fortunate that you had success later in life because it gave you time to develop and to study even more, and you would not have been able to become the composer that you are now had it not been for that. So, congratulations. It must have been a fun.
Maybe I remember a story with discussion with I had a composition teacher when I studied who tried to teach us to take care on the audience.
Okay.
He said that you have to try for the audience, that the audience will be able to understand what you are writing.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And I said to him, and I'm still proud about the sentence, well, that's fine if it works. But if it does not work, if I try to do what the audience wants, and the audience doesn't accept it, then I have nothing. If I try to do what I want, and the audience does not accept it, then I have at least done what I want, and therefore I prefer to do the second one.